right at 9 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get started. There may be a few more people, but we have it written out on the board out there, so hopefully they can find it. Or somebody will point out to everybody where they're supposed to be. So, first of all, I wanted to go around and just get introductions from everybody. I did not prepare a sign-up sheet, unfortunately, but I'll let everybody go down and make sure that I can get everybody checked off. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm Jeff Knighton. I'm the city manager for the City of Shelton.
And I'm Athena Ayers. I'm the executive director for Community Lifeline.
I'm Colleen Carmichael. I'm the executive director of Quixote Communities.
I'm Susan Kirchhoff, the executive director of the Youth Connection.
Mary Eagleson, senior citizen of Shelton.
Jason Lawson, Sergeant, Shelton PD.
I am Amber Cargills, and I'm the director of behavioral health at Mason Health.
Miguel Gutierrez, City Council member.
Polly Cahoon, business owner, downtown.
Dean Jewett, multiple business owner, downtown Shelton, lifelong member of Mason County.
Sharon Trask, Mason County Commissioner.
Blair Sherman, citizen.
Eric Nisco, City of Shelton Mayor.
Carrie Gardner, Health Officer. And I'm Kathleen Haggard, I'm the city attorney.
Great. So with that, one of the things I wanted to do first is just kind of outline what the expectations are for what we're trying to accomplish. I made a couple of notes here that regardless of perspective, I wanted to make sure everybody knows that we're all here to find appropriate solutions that, so that we can address the issue homelessness in the community. We want to stay solutions focused and fact-based, and anecdotes are relevant, but we want to keep in mind that we're trying to find solutions that are designed for the entire community of Shelton and Greater Mason County. And then we want to make sure we focus on solutions that are short, intermediate, and longer term, but within the available resources that we have. So with that, I wanted to start out with kind of a factual basis that we're working under to find solutions for this issue. And I'll turn it over to Kathleen to talk about the Boise decision and Blake and some of the legislation that came out last year from our state legislature.
All right, well, thanks everybody for having interest in homelessness within the community. As you probably know, it's not just a Shelton issue. It's really everywhere in larger cities and in smaller cities. And the reason I titled my presentation, Homelessness, Not Just a Housing Problem, is because it is a very complex issue, socioeconomic issue, issues concerning race and other minority status, legal issues, which is what I want to primarily cover today. Just by way of further introduction, I've been the city attorney here since 2007, and my primary purpose is to give you an overview of the legal framework concerning homelessness so that everyone has an understanding of some of the legal constraints that the city is dealing with. I'm not a criminal prosecutor and I have no involvement in the criminal justice system. So questions concerning on-the-ground enforcement might be better directed to Sergeant Lawson. Sorry to throw you under the bus, but hopefully you'll be able to help carry me along if there are questions about specifically how law enforcement deals with this particular problem. As Jeff mentioned, there are really two major legal issues concerning homelessness. There's what people call the Blake decision, which the Blake decision wasn't really the problem. The issue was how the legislature responded to the Blake decision. And then the second legal framework is the Martin v. City of Boise decision, which was from the 9th Circuit in 2018, and the subsequent decisions that have come down since then. So let's start with State v. Blake and talk about what that case held. This was the Washington State Supreme Court, and it was in 2021, early in the year. And the reason I say that it was the correct result is because the case was legally correct. What the court decided was that it was unconstitutional to criminalize unknowing possession of controlled substances, meaning if someone is possessing a controlled substance but they legitimately don't know that they were, you can't criminalize that, which really makes a lot of sense. And the reason that the decision was correct was that Washington was in the extreme minority of states nationwide that had what we call a strict liability standard for possession of controlled substances. Meaning even if you didn't know you were carrying, it was still potentially a felony. And the facts of the case were that there was a young woman who was subject to a search associated with a report of stolen vehicles, and they found a very small baggie of meth in the coin pocket of her jeans. So you know how small a coin pocket is, so that's really how much meth that she had. And she said, wait a minute, that isn't mine, I don't use drugs, I've never used drugs. These jeans were secondhand, I didn't know that was in the pocket. And she actually had testimony from friends who said, yeah, she doesn't use drugs, I've never known her to use drugs. So that was the set of facts that the court was faced with. And the courts for years, for decades in fact, were reading this, what we call mens rea element into these cases. Mens rea is fancy Latin for guilty mind, meaning that anytime you're found to commit a crime, you have to have some level of intent to commit the crime. And because that was missing from the statute, the courts were just sort of reading that in. But what the court found in State v. Blake was, you can't do that anymore. If the statute doesn't have this element, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and find that going back to 1971, all of these convictions are void because the law is unconstitutional. So that leads us to the chaotic reality part of State v. Blake, because what we ended up with was that there's an immediate end to prosecutions for simple possession of controlled substances, and any convictions that were based on that had to be vacated upon request. Bench warrants to pick people up who had maybe skipped their court hearings for simple possession had to be recalled. Relatively small number of inmates who were currently serving time had to be released, and sentences for simple possession had to be modified. Also, reimbursement of what's called legal financial obligations, meaning fines and fees related to simple possession. And we ended up with kind of a mess because this was very expensive and time-consuming to remedy. The state did make some funding available to assist with that, but this is something that's still going on throughout the courts and the criminal justice system. So then later in 2021, the legislature responded to the State v. Blake decision by going farther than what State v. Blake actually required. This first bullet here, the legislature added this knowing element to the statute, so now you can only be convicted of possession if you knew that you possessed the drugs, which, again, right result. But then it went further and it reduced the penalty for simple possession from a felony to a misdemeanor. And it encouraged, didn't require, but encouraged criminal prosecutors to refer defendants for services rather than prosecuting them. It decriminalized possession of paraphernalia for personal use. And it required, now this part was a requirement, law enforcement has to refer any defendant for possession for assessment and services at least twice before they can be prosecuted. So if someone gets picked up for simple possession, you send them to services. They get picked up again, you send them to services. On the third strike, so to speak, they can be charged and prosecuted. Now keep in mind this is only possession we're talking about. Other arguably more serious crimes like manufacture and dealing were not affected by these changes to the law. So that's kind of the end of the discussion of the State v. Blake and the legislative reaction. Are there any questions before we move on to Martin v. City of Boise?
I just wanted to add that the city has just entered into a contract with the administrative office of the courts to refund any of the fines going back to, what was it, 71? So the state will reimburse us, but it's still kind of an administrative nightmare going back through all the way back, like 50 years now, 51 years. So that's where we're at. We just entered into that contract 2 weeks ago.
I know for the county, it's very time consuming and expensive.
So is that refunded at 100%?
Yeah.
All right, so that leads to the second big case, which was Martin v. City of Boise. And this was a Ninth Circuit case, and the Ninth Circuit is a federal circuit court that governs Washington as well as other states. It's the largest circuit in the country. And in that case, City of Boise prosecuted a homeless person for camping in a public space. And that was contested. And the Ninth Circuit ended up holding that sleeping in public spaces, for example, sidewalk, park bench, park grounds, can be criminalized if the person has no other option, meaning there's no place that the person can go to get shelter indoors overnight. The court ruled that criminalizing this was cruel and unusual punishment if the person doesn't have any other realistic option. And the court also found, because the City of Boise argued that there was shelter space available, and there was shelter space available, yes, but there was not enough, so that was part of the problem. The other part of the problem was that roughly half to 2/3 of the shelters were run by religious organizations, which is great, which is wonderful, except that some of them required people who stayed there to participate in religious exercises. And so homeless people who were not Christian or of another religion or just not religious were compelled to participate in religious exercise in order to stay there. So the court determined that the shelter isn't really available if you're compelled to essentially sacrifice your First Amendment rights to stay there. And one thing to keep in mind about the Martin v. Boise decision is it did not affect what are commonly called sit-lie ordinances, as long as they're reasonable in scope. So 20-some years ago, the city of Seattle kind of famously passed a sidewalk sitting ordinance that precluded people from sitting, lying on the sidewalk in certain areas of the city during business hours. Because it got to be so if you were trying to circulate through downtown or through the Pike Place Market, you were literally stepping over people. And so there was this limited law that was passed, and that was upheld by the Ninth Circuit. City of Everett a few years ago passed a similar law, again narrow in scope, confined to just specific areas of town where it's a problem and just specific hours. Ordinances that prohibit obstructing the right-of-way are unaffected by Martin v. City of Boise. So if someone's putting up a tent and blocking the entire sidewalk, that can be prohibited. Obviously, blocking traffic can be prohibited. And then also, subsequent courts have found that cities can say, okay, no sleeping in this one specific area. For example, state of Hawaii, certain counties within the certain islands would find maybe one major tourist park where they would say, okay, no sleeping in this park, but everything else, if there's no shelter space available, we're not going to prosecute. And that's been found to be acceptable in subsequent cases. So in keeping with Martin v. City of Boise, we amended our municipal code in 2021. We have a very, very simple ordinance on the books. And essentially it says that camping in public is a misdemeanor, but only when the camper is informed that shelter services are available and fails or refuses to go. Or if there's a shelter available, but they won't accept the person due to criminal record or unsafe behavior. And then our ordinance also just briefly provides that if someone is essentially evicted from the campsite because shelter is available and they refuse to go, then we can clean up what they leave behind. We can dispose of items that are just obviously trash or dangerous or toxic, but we'll hold the other property for up to 60 days to allow for them to reclaim it. And we have a very specific definition of what available means for purposes of shelter. And that means that there is a shelter that has a bed and has confirmed that they will accept this particular person. So someone from the city actually needs to make a call and confirm that there's a bed available. The shelter has to be free for the camper, obviously not free for the taxpayers or the nonprofit or whoever's funding it, but free for the camper. Transportation to the shelter needs to be free, which means they either need to be able to get there themselves or we have to transport them. And then the shelter doesn't impose, essentially violate First Amendment rights by requiring participation in religious exercise that are not the religion of the particular person. So before we move on from Martin v. City of Boise, any questions?
Where does the shelter have to be located?
A
You say you
reasonable
gotta have to be
distance.
free, can it be Olympia?
Well, we're talking about that, and I think the issue with Olympia potentially is that somebody needs to transport them.
So it's $1.50, can we find a voucher and give them the $1.50 so they can get to Olympia?
As long as it's
Public
free, yes.
transportation? As long as it's free to them.
Yeah, it's free to them.
So local
Right.
businesses could come together with a fund.
That will pay bus tickets to Olympia?
I mean, potentially, I think that there's still potentially an issue if someone says, well, this isn't available to me because I need to be near my doctor, or I need to be near my drug treatment facility or whatever. That could potentially create an issue in particular cases. But I don't think you can completely take Olympia off the table as an option because it could potentially work.
That question also assumes there's space available.
I was just gonna say, you have to call and assume there's space, and as we've said, this is a problem that's everywhere, it's not just us.
Right.
Because we don't have a technical youth shelter, and we've called multiple times and there's no space. And they don't always reserve space, it's a first come, first serve. So, yeah, I don't think Olympia is really an option because they have their own problem.
So if Olympia is not an option, or Bremerton's not an option, and Shelton is not an option, so then we have no options.
Shelton is an option, we just say fix the problem.
Yeah, the shelters in Olympia go based off of a vulnerability scale. You have to call their, I believe it's like a 211 number, and they base whether or not you can get shelter off of a variety of questions related to health, related to where you're located, those types of things, and some of those can either very easily screen you into shelter or very easily screen you out. If you're coming out of county, that's one of those things that push you further down the priority list because they're accepting people from their own communities first.
And with the second you hit, if you're homeless, the second you touch the soil in Thurston County, you're now Thurston County. You're not a resident anywhere.
Not necessarily. There are people who were born and raised in Shelton, and for whatever reason.
But the word homeless means you're homeless. It means you don't have a home, you don't have a residence, you don't have.
But that doesn't mean you're not native to a certain area.
Okay.
Well, I guess one of the things we're kind of talking about too is there's a lot of transient individuals, and I don't call them basically homeless. There's a lot of people that are homeless that are good people. We all know that, right? But then there's that other element, and a lot of these other elements are not Shelton native. They came from Thurston County, whatever, where, so I guess my question is to the city attorney and to Jeff, who in the city has the responsibility of making these calls and finding this out so that the police force, if the police are the ones who are going to be doing this, or a city worker, as the ordinance is written, any city worker can do this, Parks and Recs, anybody. Who do they call to? Do they call you? Do they call the city attorney? Who do they call? Who's the person in charge?
Are you talking about who the homeless people call?
No. Who are the people that verify the shelter and whether we can have somebody transported?
Typically, our police officers do that when there's shelter space available, and I know there's strong communication daily with the shelters that exist now.
Yes.
To find out how many beds are available.
So, but there's not an individual that has that as a job description.
No.
So maybe that's something that we need to look at.
We did fund a homeless outreach coordinator in the 2020 budget, and then COVID hit, and unfortunately that position was eliminated. So it's something that we have addressed. It's just a matter of available resources. Again, going back to what I first mentioned, within the available resources.
We
And I
have
understand.
employees that work at Community Lifeline as well as Shelton Youth Connection. I know we get our staff together in teams to do outreach. I know Jamie Ellerson from Public Health and with law enforcement. There's outreach happening from multiple. I know Crossroads is involved in that effort as well. So, I mean, there are people on the ground. The problem is, for example, with my shelter, Community Lifeline only has 14 beds available right now. And there's been a reported 254 homeless people in Mason County, reported. So 14 beds available versus 254 people is not enough. And Crossroads, primarily a family shelter, they do have some services for single adults. There's a waiting list for those services that are up to 5 years long. That's not effective.
And you were asking, I just wanted to clarify, when they do a screening and you said something about when they touch Thurston County soil, that's not true. You have to, they do what's called prior living assessment. I'm just kind of pointing, this is an educational thing. So when we screen someone in, we specifically say, where did you sleep last night? Okay, so that is considered their prior living place. Okay, so that's one of the reasons
So they
why.
go spend one night in Olympia, then they can be Olympia?
Then they would be Olympia. Yes, they would. And that's the truth
Well, I'm
of
just
it.
saying, these are semantics that we've got to figure out how to get
No,
around.
but this is the truth of it. We specifically are required to ask, where did you sleep last night? Where do you plan to sleep tonight? And that's part of the
See, and
assessment.
where this is not biased though, is it's whatever information they give you. They can lie, they can do whatever they want, and they can, so I can show up in Olympia tomorrow, say I'm homeless and I stayed here, and they have to take me?
No, because there's not beds available. They don't, nobody is required to take anyone.
Right, but
But
they
you would
can at
then,
least
you
take
could
you
be
to the
considered
assessment.
an Olympionian or whatever you want to call that. So they wouldn't judge you based on being out of county if you said, no, I spent the night in the park last night. They would take you at your word. They're not gonna lie or make you prove that that's what happened.
So the one thing that I want to kind of get out there is, and Jeff has hit on this numerous times, and it's all on budget, right? It's all on the funds. It's where do we get the money to do this? How much does it cost us to not do this? How many extra services do the police force have to do? How many extra garbage runs do we have to pick up to the individuals that I see at Brewer Park? How much extra funding and money goes into this that's a waste that has no positive outcome of it, that's just a reoccurring outflow of money versus let's dig up the tansy and stop it from killing the cows. But what do we have to do?
So here's what I'll say to that. On the discussion points on the agenda, one of those ones is how does it affect city operations? And I will answer those questions under that point, but I want to allow Kathleen to get to the rest of the presentation and we'll get into that.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
I would be a little concerned about shipping homeless to Olympia and causing a war and them saying, well, we've got more homeless than they do. Let's ship them to Shelton. Let's give them a bus ticket.
See, but we're sending them to resources. They're sending them here to nothing.
Well-
So are they allowed to break the rules and we're not?
So.
I would just be concerned that, I would
You're
be
saying
concerned, I would
you're
be
able to break the
concerned that they
rules.
have more
Let's let
homeless
it-
there, and if we keep sending our homeless, they're gonna say, well, we're gonna do the same thing to us, and we definitely don't want another 500 people downtown. I would just be careful.
Yeah, and I just want to say, let's let everybody speak and finish their piece first. But also, if I remember right, and Kathleen, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a federal case in the 90s where the city of Las Vegas was shipping people to San Francisco for that very reason. I don't remember the particulars of it, I just remember Las Vegas got slapped pretty hard for that. So,
If you want to solve the problem too, I've had a lot of experience in doing this. I actually moved to a city that did not have services and they had a very large homeless problem. We added services and their homeless problem decreased by 45%. So I think there's a lot of unfortunate misinformation about what services do. Services actually take people off the streets, but I think it's difficult for the community, and I know because I live in a community, to understand how it is that if you provide services, it reduces it. But that's the truth. And I know here in Shelton, because it's similar to the city that I started a homeless service program in, you have limited services. You only have so many shelter beds. You don't have any permanent supportive housing. You have very little transitional housing. But the homeless numbers are still there. And it's because the people typically that are homeless, and this is statistically across the United States, about 80 to 85% of those people are from the area. And they don't want to leave because that's where they were born and raised. So it's a lot to do with mental health. It's a lot to do with addiction. It's a lot to do with an inability to stay housed because of your race or your gender. It's a lot.
What does race have to do with being housed?
Because poverty, unfortunately, there's a lot of discriminatory practices still in housing.
Yeah, I don't see that.
I know, and a lot of people don't, and I get that, and it's. And
I think that's something that it's a colorful talking point we like to throw out there. I think you can go get, anybody can go get a job anywhere, anybody can go get, I don't buy that.
I know it's hard,
Yeah, I don't
do,
accept
and
that,
it's
that's
just
not
the
real.
people that are sitting
We're
in
keeping that alive by
services.
using that as a talking
let's let
point.
each person speak.
I apologize.
I think that the thing that you all need to understand, those of you who are not in homeless services, all of us have a similar goal, which is to get people off the streets. And I think that's what you want too. And I think it's just the understanding that it does actually cost more money for people to stay out on the streets. It's statistically proven that and it's not just homeless service providers who are providing that information, because I think that's important. You don't want it to be people who are skewing it to their favor. It's just statistically shown that it's cost more because you're involving the police, you're involving hospitals, you're involving a lot of people that have to take care of this crisis, and it is a crisis. So we're just trying to help with solutions and help give you an idea of the scope of the problem and how we have to serve it.
And I couldn't agree more, and that's what I said with the financial side of it, but I think what you're seeing from some of us business owners and people is a very, very, very high level of frustration.
That's why we're here.
And I appreciate it, I do.
Yeah, and it is for us too, just so you know, because we want to help, we hear you. We don't want you to feel that way. We really don't, and we wish that we had more funding to help with the problem, because we would house people if we could. So I just want you to know that we're also business owners. We're trying to do the best we can, and every time we come into meetings, there's a lot of frustration, sometimes targeted at us, but we are really legitimately trying to get people off the streets in the best way that we can. And we run businesses, so I just want you all to understand that. We're trying to do what we know is right, and we also understand your frustrations, and we're not unaware of them.
Everybody has to understand
Shelton, yes.
how small our town is also. We're not Olympia, we're not Seattle, this is just Shelton. We want to keep our community cute and nice and everything, but we really don't, at one point we'll say we want to expand, but we can't. Where we're going to expand to? Cut down all the trees and then move the hills, and then we're not going to be the city that everybody knows. So we have a small city here. In a small city, there's not that money like there is in bigger cities or counties or whatever to put buildings, put places for people to stay. So the problem goes all the way back to the beginning. You're going to have to start at the beginning, not just in the middle of let's do this and let's try to do this. where are you gonna put them? Because we have what, 2, 3 places in this whole town for people. And believe me, if you've never been in those places, it isn't easy to get in and it isn't nice inside. So, you know, you think, put them in a shelter. Well, what if they get treated bad in the shelter? What if it's a good person, they get treated bad in the shelter? And then what? Then they're back out on the street, okay? So, you know, it's an endless cycle. And so you're gonna have to solve problems on all points of it. You know, you need more shelter, but you're gonna have to make sure that those shelters also treat those people decent. Just because you're homeless, just because you needed help in the shelter, does not mean you get treated different than anybody else unless you do something bad.
Yeah, but you also have to realize that we're infringing on other people's laws and our rights as citizens of this town.
Okay, but they
Because
have
they're
rights.
allowing trespassing, they're allowing loitering, they're allowing things that happen to us downtown.
Then you go back to,
And then
then
my
you go back to,
other
it's
my
a
other
problem.
thought
Why
is,
can't we put them in jail?
what about the thought of that family who is on a single income, poverty level, minimum wage jobs, doing the best they can, and they're in an apartment and they're paying their rent and they're managing to get by on a thread, but they're doing it and they're working 2 jobs, whatever. But then isn't it easier just to roll over and say, hey, I'll go to the street? You know, they have more rights than I do, the working poor.
Let me
let's
explain that it's more
Mary.
expensive to live on the street sometimes than it is in.
I beg to disagree.
Mary, let's get back to finish up the presentation and then we can get a little bit of discussion going, okay?
Okay, so the next slide has to do with clearing tent encampments, because that's also an issue with if you do have people move on, or if people are in unauthorized encampments, you can end up with a public nuisance pretty quickly if you don't have sanitation facilities and you have camps and personal belongings associated with the camps. And so how do you go about clearing those? And this is addressed in City of Los Angeles v. Laban. It's from a couple of years ago. And essentially what that case required is you have to give at least 72 hours notice that the camp is going to be cleared. And then you have to hold personal belongings for a reasonable period of time, meaning you can't just take everything and chuck it in the trash. You can throw away obvious garbage, filth, anything dangerous, but you do have to hold like the tent or the cooking implements for a reasonable period of time to allow those to be reclaimed. There's a Washington State case, State v. Pippin, which rules that if a tent is being lived in, it's the same as a dwelling unit. It's protected from unreasonable search and seizure, just as the police can't come barge into your house without a warrant and take your stuff. If you're living in a vehicle or you're living in a tent, you have that zone of privacy around it. So that's also something to be aware of for law enforcement purposes. And one thing we've been talking about doing is when we do have unauthorized encampments on private property as opposed to public property, we're talking about ways to address that by requiring the property owner to do an abatement. And we, as I said, we've had those discussions but haven't adopted an ordinance addressing that quite yet.
July is when that will come back.
Okay. Another really important case was City of Seattle v. Long, and this was another Washington State Supreme Court case. Mr. Long was living in a truck and he was parked in a City of Seattle parking lot. And he was there for longer than the city wanted him to be there. He alleged that he was getting services at the VA and wanted to be close to those services, and also his truck wasn't running so great, which is why he didn't move along. His truck was towed, And under the City of Seattle ordinance, the costs of impoundment were shifted to him. The city did compromise those costs because originally it was like $900 and they knocked it down to $500. But of course, Mr. Long couldn't pay that. And so the Supreme Court ruled that the fines and fees were excessive punishment and another violation of the Eighth Amendment, which was the same legal grounds in the Martin v. City of Boise case. And the court essentially ruled, it didn't rule that you can't tow, and it didn't rule that you can't shift the cost of towing. But what it did say was, at the impound hearing, the judge needs to assess the person's ability to pay. So if they can pay, great. If they can't, figure out what they can pay and proceed accordingly. You can still tow where necessary for public safety. For example, if someone's parked in a tow-away zone where they're blocking traffic, they're parked in a fire lane, they're blocking a stop sign. And also the City of Seattle v. Long case left open the question of whether someone simply overstays their welcome in a residential area, whether you can still tow them. Because remember, the facts of that case were he was in a City of Seattle parking lot. So other than kind of overstaying his welcome, he wasn't really causing a lot of trouble to traffic or surrounding residential neighbors.
How did they deal with the sanitation issues associated with that?
That wasn't addressed in the case.
It'd be an interesting topic, though. I think that as a county, and especially the health department, I think that that's a huge issue that should be looked at, because if you're living in an RV, where are you disposing of your black water?
Yeah, he was actually leaving in a truck. It wasn't even an RV. Yeah. But no, that wasn't addressed in the case. So this is my final slide, and you know, as you've heard, I'm a city attorney. I'm not a housing expert. I'm not a homelessness expert. I've never been a criminal prosecutor. So these talking points are just what I've seen from viewing the cases and being around discussions of this issue when representing my cities. And really, this is not just a housing problem. It's really a complicated mix of a lot of factors. Lack of housing is certainly a big one. Because what is happening out there is we don't have enough housing, and so rents are being driven up, and there's all this upward pressure on the cost of rent, and rent is rising faster than people's incomes are rising, and so that's creating this pressure that is driving a large number of people out of the housing market entirely. So housing is a really big factor in this. Another really big factor is mental health. People who have mental health issues. I was talking with the chief yesterday about how difficult it is for even kind of, for lack of a better word, normally functioning people to navigate our medical system, to navigate our institutions. You know, imagine if you had bipolar disorder, or if you had some other mental illness that required treatment and medication, and you lack the resources, you lack the income, you lack the medical insurance, you lack transportation to be able to manage that condition. And then the last one, obviously, substance abuse. We saw a rise in homelessness along with the opiate epidemic. And so these three factors are very closely linked, and they're all contributing issues. And so a couple of solutions, if you will, some short-term, some medium-term, some long-term. They're again mentioned in the case law and that I hear talked about in my work. More shelter space is certainly a big one for these overnight shelters and these short-term emergency shelters. As we've heard discussed already here today, there is just not enough of that, nowhere close. Some larger cities, and I don't know if Mason County is doing this, have these real-time dashboards now where rather than making a call, do you have a bed, do you have a bed, you can actually log in and see who has bed space and communicate electronically. So that can help speed things up, and also give some visibility to the problem. There's the issue of hygiene, toilet, and secure storage facilities. Simple things like, where do you charge your phone? Because if you're homeless and you need to be making medical appointments and staying in touch with your providers, you're gonna need some way to do that. So, where do you get a phone? Where do you charge a phone? And cities that I'm aware of are building these centers where people can go take a shower, use the bathroom, store some belongings, charge their phone, get out of the heat, get out of the cold, and just have that little bit of service. Because if you're trying to get a job so you can get income and you can get off the street, you need to be able to take a shower, to go to your interview. You need to be able to groom yourself. Another short-term solution potentially are regulated tent encampments. Not these tent encampments that are just popping up unregulated all over the place, but regulated encampments where there are standards for hygiene facilities, where they have porta potties, where they have a certain amount of law enforcement oversight, where they're in specific zones of the city where they're less inclined to cause a problem. A lot of these are managed by religious organizations that have solving homelessness as a core tenet of their religion. For example, the UCC is a big one. And safe parking programs, again, some public agencies and nonprofits and religious organizations are hosting these where people can go and just park a car. So they're not on the right of way, so they're not in a residential neighborhood. Potentially they're attached to hygiene facilities. But those are all short-term solutions. Medium-term solutions would be transitional housing, where people can go and it's not an emergency shelter where they're just going for a night or a couple of nights. It's a place where they're working on getting into permanent housing. There's permanent supportive housing. I know Everett just built a big facility in their downtown area. City of Shoreline, where I live, has a big facility now where it's essentially an apartment building that has on-site services, has on-site mental health, on-site addiction recovery, on-site potentially job counselors to help people get into employment. Because there's just a certain segment of the population, whether by addiction issues or mental illness or other factors, is going to have trouble staying in permanent housing. And so these facilities may potentially allow them to do that.
Who pays for those
Last
facilities?
long-term, sorry.
Who pays for those facilities?
Well, oftentimes they're a combination of state funding, federal funding. ARPA funds are being used now for some of those facilities. Nonprofits will kick in. I know the facility in Shoreline where I live was hosted by the Methodist Church. And so they kicked in some money, the city kicked in some money, state and federal services as well. And then lastly, affordable housing is another big one. The Growth Management Act is really leaning hard on Growth Management Act counties, which Mason County is, but particularly the more urban counties, King, Pierce, Snohomish, Clark, Spokane counties, to plan for more affordable multifamily housing. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing is there's opposition to that, because you'll have a community that's primarily been single family over the years, and they don't necessarily want the change. They don't necessarily want the multifamily housing. But, do you want to cure homelessness or do you not? And affordable housing long-term is part of the solution.
Can I jump in on that one real quick, just for the county? So the county has changed some of our building codes so that we can go 3 stories high. And I think the city did that also. So I don't know that the county or the city is opposed to affordable housing. I think that's, I don't want to say talking point, but I think you have to look at specific areas, Mason County's not one, definitely not King County, thank you very much. But it's still rural, and do understand that people need affordable housing, and so our building department has, and along with the commissioners, have worked to make it easier to build higher and with less cost. So that one is being addressed at the county level, and I believe at the state level also, because you guys, we now have a tall ladder truck, and that was one of the fire truck. So that was one of the reasons why we couldn't go higher. And now that we've got that tall ladder, it's easier, thanks to the fire department.
I just got back from Association of Washington Cities where I attended a class on missing middle. You know, back in the 20s, you know, the people would immigrate over here and they would save some money and then they would build a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex, and they would live in one and rent out the other three. Over the years, the class explained over the years, counties and cities, states have backed away from that kind of building, and you know, and that really helps, the density really helps that.
Right, and there's also we're working on a revision to the law. There's a law that stops condos in Washington state, which makes no sense to me at all. So we're working with the legislature to get that changed so that we can start building those across Washington state also. So it's not, a lot of our issues are statewide, not just countywide or citywide, but they are being addressed. So some of these things will come to fruition. Thank you very much. The condo one makes no sense at all. You can build an apartment but not a condo. So anyway, so some of these are being addressed as far as affordable housing.
All right, and that's all I have.
I think the affordable housing, and I'm gonna read it a totally different way. Mason County in Shelton, we just had that whole thing that came, and I'm not remembering totally what it was, but the presentation, Jim Morrell was heading it up. And the city, not the city officials or the county officials, the residents fought that.
Look at old boys.
Fought it like hot potatoes.
It was
So-
workforce housing development.
Thank you. But it was designed the way that I understood it, and I had some I'm not gonna lie, I had reservations when I read it myself. But what I get out of that affordable is not that the city and county don't recognize that we need affordable housing, but that the community at large don't want to see change. They understand the problem, but with the problem to be addressed, you have to have change. And I see that as part of the problem too, is that education of why. What does affordable housing then bring? What can we do to then change that changing it that let's build a quadplex?
But on that, the reason that people didn't like it is location, location, location.
Nobody's gonna like it anywhere right now.
If you have a $400,000 house and you have a single wide 1970s mobile home move in and it decreases your value, you're not gonna be happy.
Well,
that wasn't
sucks to be
the case.
Okay, let's, hold on. You all done, Kathleen?
I am.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll get into the next part of the agenda, item E, if you're taking a look at that. A couple of things I wanted to go over. This is the first meeting, so when we get the factual basis and everything else, we have 6 total of these scheduled, and if we need a few more, we can go a few more. This one, we wanted to kind of get a few of these issues out on the table. The next one, we're going to talk about the unique factors in Shelton that maybe make us different from other places. And then third meeting, what does work other places? And will pieces and parts of that work here? There's no need to reinvent the wheel, right? So we can take a look at that. And fourth, what funding is necessary? So that's getting to what Dean asked a little bit earlier. We'll get into a little bit of that today, but really drill down on it in the fourth meeting, which will be probably when it's raining again. Thanks, we'll see you tonight. Which will be, September? So maybe not raining quite yet. Fifth, what are the solutions? So we have, some of the ideas up here, but then come up with unique solutions for our community that we can implement here, given the constraints that we operate under. And then 5 to 8 concrete steps that we can take, short, intermediate, and long term, to actually address this issue. So again, few of those ideas up there. But going on to item E here, how does homelessness affect you in your capacity in the community? And not everybody needs to speak, but those that do, we're gonna limit you to 3 minutes, and just, you get to speak. Nobody's gonna interrupt anybody else. Just tell us what your experiences are. So I'll open it up. Whoever wants to go first, just go ahead and go.
I can go first.
Okay.
So, homelessness affects me because I'm working the front lines of it every day. I understand the frustrations behind, it's a multifaceted issue. It's not just that somebody's addicted to drugs. It's not just that somebody has mental health issues. It's not just that somebody doesn't make enough of an income. It's a combined factor of things that we just don't currently have the resources to address. So when we come together like this is a good step forward because there are resources in the room that maybe I didn't know about, or maybe solutions to a problem that I didn't maybe see in that perspective. So this is a really good step forward to that. But I also understand or am impacted by homelessness because I live here. I've lived here for the last decade. My kids go to school here. I know that, when you go downtown and you try to go grocery shopping at Safeway, more often than not, there's some kind of shenanigans happening, that people don't necessarily want to have to walk through every day. But I can also tell you that as a person that works the front lines of homelessness every single day, there is not one place in all of Mason County that homeless people are allowed to go and be there 24 hours a day. Where are they supposed to go? Because if they're standing out in front of Safeway, you're going to shoo them off or ridicule them for being there. If they're sitting at the park, you're going to take pictures of them and tell them that they shouldn't be there either. If they're on public property somewhere, then where are they supposed to go? So if we don't have at least one place that they can be off the streets, that they can be out of in front of businesses, then we're complaining without providing a solution, which I hope is what we're doing here. But a simple answer to the question is I watch these people on both ends of the spectrum. Because I'm not going to sit here and say that there aren't those people that do cause trouble. But there are really good people too. There are people that have never been homeless before in their lives. They're elderly people, they're on fixed incomes. I can tell you right now, from lived experience, in July of last year, I had to leave an unhealthy relationship and I myself faced homelessness. I lived with a friend of mine for 7 months as I searched relentlessly every single day, went to multiple housing interviews. I spent hundreds of dollars on rental applications. I finally found a home for me and my 2 kids for $2,200 a month that I have to work 2 jobs for. So I face that reality every single day. Every single day. And I have to go to work and look these people in the eyes and tell them that there's hope, knowing that there are so many facets to, can you pass a credit background check? Can you make 3 times $2,200 a month for rent? Absolutely not.
It's about 3 minutes. Go ahead, finish up.
No, I'm just saying it's a much bigger issue. It's not just that, find a job or find a house or get into treatment or whatever. It's a much bigger issue. And so I'm happy that we're all here together. I'm hopeful for some solutions. But it's difficult to hear people come from one perspective when there's so many others to understand.
Anybody like to go next?
I will. So, I've been homeless. So I can relate. I was homeless when I was 17. I was homeless again when I had 4 children. I've lived a life. I can tell you what some of them feel. I traded sex for a safe place to stay. I've done it what I had to do. I did what I had to do to live. And let me tell you, when I had 4 children, I did not wake up in the morning and say, can I please be homeless? That is not my life. That was not what happened. So I get really passionate, and if I ever come across, I'm going to say this up front right now, I get really passionate about it. So if I ever say anything that offends you, it's not intended. It's really just a passionate, it is a problem. And I agree. what we see at the Shelton, at the Youth Connection, we see young people coming in desperate. They're desperate. They don't know what to do. When I have it pouring down rain outside and the young kid won't take a tent because he knows he's gonna get arrested, but yet he's gotta go sleep outside, you know, how do I help him? What can I say? My shelters are full. I don't know how to help him, and the hotels are full. We had money to pay for a hotel, but the hotel was full. So it is a huge issue, and unfortunately there's that 10% that make it horrible, and I've dealt with those 10%. I mean, we deal with them regularly, but it's that 10%. So to lump them all in that is unfair because of the dynamics. Like I just heard her when she said something about the adults. That's the highest population right now going up because rents have skyrocketed. So I have older people that call me and go desperate. Oh my gosh, my rent just doubled. And I'm on a fixed income. So now what do they're facing homelessness. So it affects me because I've dealt with it and now I see it every day. And I agree it's a problem. But I feel for myself, I've worked really hard to make an effort in the downtown area. I clean up my space all the time. I encourage the young people to clean up the space. And I just hope we can find a solution. That's all I'm gonna say.
I'll jump in next. Both you individuals are very passionate. So, my respect goes out to you. I understand it. I do try everything that I can do, and a lot of people that I work with try to see both sides of it. I'm going to come across as what I feel needs to be done and where my passion lies. And I'll apologize, because I do not have an anger towards all homelessness. And so I try not to use homelessness as the word. It is the street individuals that cause a negative impact in our community that people see. When people see that, they are then tainted to think and throw everybody into a group like you talked about. That is human nature. Okay, we're going to group that because that's what we see. Holly sees it, I see it, all these business owners, we see it, and we don't see.
We see the 10%.
Right, and we don't. So we don't.
The little old lady who can't afford a rent.
We don't see. We don't see some of these good things that you say. I actually took a minute because there was a gentleman that there's a lot of people that I trespass out of my parking lot, and I have a form on file with the police just for that. And so there was an individual that was going back and forth parking and coming across ours because, as everybody knows, there's a shelter area right next to us that I'm not real fond of. I actually took a second. We got in an argument. I stepped back, comes back and forth. He's got a job. He's working himself in a positive direction. So I respect that. But I'm still very passionate when somebody defecates, urinates, throws litter everywhere, gets food from every place, throws it all over town. Then we have birds, garbage. We got shopping carts that are flying around. So I'm on a seek and destroy mission for shopping carts. I'm not going to lie. I've got a dozen of them in my building right now. Okay? So we do need to take some common sense approach to this. And my way may not be the way. Okay? But it's going to be part of the way. But to say that 80-85% of the people are from this area, I would strongly disagree. Okay?
Well, they spend one night here and then they're here.
Well, I would like to see the data, because everybody knows that data can be manipulated to sway one way or the other. Okay? Whether that's regional, whatever else. I don't care about national. I care about Mason County. That's what I care about. Because this is what I see. If my mom and my grandma and my grandchildren have to step over a homeless person sleeping or peeing in my fountain, then I've got an issue with it. So I think that the resources that we have are spread out over 100% of the situation, when really, as a society, we should be helping the 30% that want to help themselves.
That's about 3 minutes needed. Just go ahead and wrap up.
No, I'm good. I think if people get my point.
Okay, but I'm gonna go with what you're talking about, the people on the street that are doing the bad stuff, 95% of them, or 98% of them, are the people that are on drugs, that are leaving crap around, doing stuff, defecating, everything on the street. So you have, it's very hard because, and I've been there. I was there, like she was. I walked into the post office, but I had a cart, dressed nice, like this. I said hello to a lady. She just turned her head. I turned around and I said, excuse me. I did say hello, nicely. And she goes, oh, I'm sorry, hello. I said, I'm not a drug addict. I'm not an alcoholic. When somebody says hello to you and they look, you say, can't you say hello back? This is the problem. No offense to anybody. This is the problem in this small town. A lot of people think because they have businesses, because they're homeowners, because there's people out there that are having problems, they just automatically, everybody is a bad person. And it isn't that way. It isn't. Yes, we have a lot of bad people. I'm going to go along with that. Yes, I agree with that. I've seen them. But I've also been on the streets and talked to people and been around them and try to get a job. Everybody talks about going out and getting a job. Well, I'm 75 now, but 5 years ago I was 70. I've had 4 businesses. I didn't have a car then. I tried to get a job in this town. Walmart, all the little places. You don't have a car? You don't have a regular address yet for the City of Shelton? No job. Can't get it. Nope, sorry, not till you get a car and stuff. Oh, there's restrictions now. So we have restrictions on these people who are decent, trying to get a job, and then they can't. So then how are they going to be able to afford to get into any place if we're going to categorize them because you don't have a car? I had a bicycle. There's a bus system. As long as I can get to work, that should be the only problem. If I can get there and do my job right, then give that person a job. If they don't show up, then okay, hire somebody else. But they don't even give you a chance. They don't even give you a chance. And where they talk about defecating, we don't have places after 1 o'clock in the morning in this town. If you're a woman that's homeless, where are you going to go potty? Where are you going to go to the bathroom?
We had porta potties downtown, but
let's
they were ruined.
Yes, I understand they got ruined. I understand that, but I'm just making a point that there is no place
Right, but
at
we
this
won't
point because
have,
of the bad people.
we won't have a downtown if we don't have businesses. We will lose our downtown identity. I mean, you can look on Shelton Talks, any of those pages. I mean, people go on and on. I've had a business, my family has had a business downtown since 1973. It's becoming increasingly, you know, you try to keep your buildings up, you try to plant flowers, you try to do things. And I mean, all my landscaping has been vandalized, graffiti on the building, windows broken 3 years in a row, water stole, electricity stolen. And then the city sends me a letter saying, oh, your water usage is up, so your bill's gonna be high next month. Where I've got cameras showing RVs pulling up and filling their tank with my water, which were all locked at one time, but they were all vandalized and reopened. And, you know, why not just roll over and say, board it up, let's leave. I pay taxes to keep this downtown open.
Don't you think that the biggest problem we should talk about is
Hey, Mary,
a big jail?
I don't want these to be a conversation.
So the thing that I think of with my building is I've had 3 broken windows. I have beautiful plate glass windows that open up onto the post office park. My customers have to sit there and look at the stuff we see going on. I mean, is unbelievable. Unbelievable that we see going on in the park. And we call the cops probably 6 times a week, which is a huge drain on their resources. But the cops tell us, keep calling us, keep calling us. I have a certain right to be safe in this town. I have a certain right of laws of trespass, of, you know, of paying taxes as owning a business. And I clean up dirty clothes, blankets. I had to install cameras. I've had broken windows. I've had graffiti. needles in my planter boxes, alcohol bottles in my planter boxes, defecation in my planter boxes, where I won't even let the girls garden out there without gloves and masks and everything, because I don't know what's all in there. We've seen what goes in there, but they hassle my clients, they panhandle my clients. My clients have to park across the street where they're all congregated, smoking in the park, which is not allowed, but they do it. And I don't know what they're smoking, but a lot of times we can tell what they're smoking. There's broken down cars in my parking. We have a huge parking issue in this town, and I don't know if the city recognizes it, but we have a huge parking issue in this town. Everyone who owns a business thinks it's their right to park in front of our building. And someone opened up a business short term. She parked in front of my business at 6 o'clock in the morning and would leave it there till 6 o'clock at night. I walked over to her business and I said to her, if you think it's okay to park in front of my business for 8 hours, can I park in front of your business for 8 hours? You know, we're just so stupid as far as we're in business.
That's right about 3 minutes, Holly.
Our clients need a place to park. But you go down Railroad Avenue, you can't find a spot because all the employees are parked in those spots. But I get off task. I have to schedule my workers so they don't work alone because they don't want to walk to their car alone at night. They don't want to be in my business alone at night, so I have to schedule 2 to work. You spend money beautifying, trying to beautify downtown, and we don't have any rights. There's no loitering laws, there's nothing. They can step over people trying to get into my business, and I just don't feel the support.
And some of that was making sure that everybody understands the legal constraints that we're under federal law. So
Right.
That's what that was about today. Anybody else like to go?
I own a business in town, not downtown, but I have issues on a daily basis as well as you guys. I deal with shoplifting almost every day. I could probably pull a video up right now for yesterday and find somebody stealing from me. I was broken into last week. I'm multiple graffiti. Just recently, I actually got a guy on camera this time. Nobody wants homelessness. There's a lot of people trying to solve this problem. We have a Housing Behavioral Health Advisory Board, which I'm currently on, ran by the county. Commissioner Schutte chairs it. We have council members on opiate boards, and there's just so many people trying to solve this problem. We're not ignoring this problem. We are looking every day. We talk about it for years. We talk about solutions. We try to pass things. How can we protect people downtown? How can we protect private property owners from people going on their property? How do we protect the people up on, Birch Street with that trail there? You know, we closed the trail, we put lights up, we cut trees down. We're trying different things. We're not ignoring it. We're not derelict of duty. We are looking at a lot of solutions constantly. There are restrictions with some of these things. I understand. There are some ideas that you have that I've seen online that I might agree with. I will never comment on my personal Facebook and bring my personal information into, public disclosure. If you want to call me, my city phone number. It's online. But we try. The police try. The courts are trying. Staff is trying. This new committee is trying. Here's the number one problem in my mind is mental health. This whole group should go down to the state when legislation opens up and find out what the heck they can do to help us with mental health. They've shut down facilities. They put everybody back into the counties where they came from. They gave counties money, but counties don't know what to do. What do we do with the mental problem? We have people on the streets that don't belong in jail. They don't belong. They can't live on their own. They belong somewhere where they're being looked after, whether it's minimal or medium or, or even higher, like maybe being in Western State. But it started way back, it actually started in the 80s, releasing people out of mental facilities. That is number one problem. And then we have addiction. That's our second problem. Circumstance people, we can help them, but we have to fix mental illness first. Then we can get addiction.
Can I just say one thing? I think our big thing, though, is we keep saying homelessness. And I don't think our problem downtown is homelessness. Our problem downtown is the 10% that constantly vandalize. And I'm not talking about homelessness. These people, no one would No one would hire these people. No one would rent to these people that I'm talking about. No way.
It's mental illness and addiction.
It's
That's
mental
our two
illness and
biggest
addiction,
problems.
and they are a chronic problem downtown. I'm not talking about homelessness.
So one
Yeah,
of the,
there's nothing we can do at this level.
They're
We have to
lawbreakers.
go after the state to help us.
one of the things that we're working on, and that the mayor has brought up and several other council members has brought up, is on our legislative agenda. So we work with a lobbyist that represents us before the legislature. And we have things on the capital project, things like a new water line or sewer line. But another part of that is the policy side. And one of the things that our mayor and several of other council members have said is we have to push our legislature to provide help for mental health resources because of the things that Eric was just mentioning. We don't have the money to address that here on our own, but cities and counties across the state are pushing for that same thing because of the closure of Western State and Eastern State, bringing it back to the counties where they come from. So we need that help from the state legislature, and we are pushing for that. But it's not, as a matter of fact, we'll have a study session with our lobbyists to talk about the legislative agenda July 12th, if anybody wants to watch that. Yeah. Well, yeah, so I think, does anybody else want to say anything? I want to talk a little bit about.
Can I have a few more seconds?
Yeah, I just want to say, anybody that wants to talk on affecting those experiencing it, those two kind of got melded together. So we've heard a little bit about that, but any of those first two, one or two, if anybody else wants to, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say also our jail space. We actually have 0 jail space. Lack of officers is one of them, and space, and I think the county is working on jail solutions. We are looking at jail solutions, maybe to move some people to other jurisdictions, if they're sentenced, but that's all.
To run their car off the road, but the person who comes to detain them, they tell them, no, I don't want to do that anymore. They're going to let them go. They're not going to keep them. All it takes is that person saying, I don't want to do it anymore. And they know in that moment, and then those people are slipping through the cracks. So I just want to share that a lot of mental health is not addressed in our community. Even those that we can help, they can't always get to appointments. Transportation is a barrier. Filling beds is a barrier for our Medicare folks who can't afford the co-pays. There's just so many parts that I think are right there that just need to be aware of too.
If we get a vote in our police, we've had hands up over here a couple times through the meeting, if they want to say anything.
A couple things, I know people get frustrated. We deal with 10%, 90% of our time. And that's the way it is. They recently took away Involuntary Treatment Act holds for law enforcement. So we can no longer, as a police officer, go in and say, okay, you're feeling suicidal, we're going to take you to the hospital, we're going to detain you. We are trying to work with the crisis teams coming in, and we've gotten a lot better. And I know there were some questions on whose job was it to call the shelters. But almost 100% of us know as a department to call the shelters and, hey, do you have services? We've gotten, with Athena taking over, we have gotten a lot of good working relationships where we can go in and say, hey, we have this, what can we get? And there has been times where we've been able to, when staffing permits, that we can drive them to Olympia because we can get them in somewhere. And it's just kind of the luck of the draw. That day we can get somebody into Olympia. We get just as frustrated because there is people that we see daily, and a lot of these people have been in Shelton, Mason County for 20 plus years and lived on the streets for 20 plus years. We get the community's frustrations. We definitely get it because there's times that we're frustrated. We call the crisis team and they're busy. Those folks are incredibly busy, and we all have them on speed dial. We've got Jamie over at the county, we have Debbie, our navigator here for the city. They're on our speed dial. We talk to them and we work with them all the time. So there's things that go on behind the scenes that a lot of the citizens don't see us. And I'll tell you, between me and some of my officers, there's been times where we've been able to get people into a hotel room on our own dime just because they need a place. And it's not something that we advertise, but we do it because nobody wants to be there. You know, it sucks. And that 10% we deal with, we're gonna keep dealing with it the best we can. Resources are slow, they changed a whole bunch of laws and a whole bunch of decisions, and it's like a super slow squeaky wheel trying to get started. But we're definitely trying, and we're working with the different stakeholders throughout the community to make it the best we can at the moment.
I think what's hard is a lot of people don't know your restrictions.
Right. That's part of what this is about. So one more, and then I want to talk a little bit about what happens actually internally in the city, so everybody's actually aware of what's going on, and that we're not just doing nothing.
I just wanted to make a few comments, not as your health officer, but as an emergency physician. So I've been an ER doc for 25 years, and we're kind of the common final pathway for this population. I've worked in homeless task forces in cities like Santa Monica, Anchorage, really big homeless populations, and everything that was said over here is true. It's very unsafe in general to be homeless. And for women to be homeless, it's extremely unsafe. And I think you're also right, it's the 10%. There are a lot of homeless people who don't want to be. There are a certain number of people who don't want to play by the rules. I'm not going to say they want to be homeless, but they don't want to play by the rules that the rest of us play with. I have to take my hats off to law enforcement. I've done lots of ride-alongs and watched officers catalog shopping cart item after shopping cart item with tremendous respect for the person that they were working with, and my hats are off to those colleagues. But Eric is right, if we do not firmly address the substance abuse and the mental health, we will never get anywhere, because substance abuse leads to the dual diagnosis, people who are both mentally ill and using substances. Methamphetamines, if you didn't have a mental health disorder before you started using methamphetamines, you definitely have one afterwards. And when they come to us and when they come to law enforcement, there really is no place to send people. There are so many rules about taking away people's rights. People can't take care of themselves. And so I hope that this task force just recognizes the importance. I just wanted to add my emphasis to that need so that we can address that too.
Okay, so for the last 5 minutes, I just kind of want to talk about what we're doing in the city, what we have done, and the things that we're pursuing, and also the impact of homelessness on the city. And I'll just give you one example of that. For those not familiar with public financing, right, you have different funds that you can only spend money in that fund on certain specific things. So in the park fund, we have a budget of a little over, I believe it's 1.3 million for this year. Some of those funds are budgeted for capital projects, like rebuilding the playground equipment in Nealon Park. Because of homelessness and the impacts that it has on our employees that work in the parks department, the costs of addressing that, cleaning up parks, cleaning up picnic tables, cleaning up bathroom facilities, things like that, those costs continue to go up, which impacts our capital funds, so that we are no longer able to do a rebuild of all the playground equipment. And that's not just the parks fund, that happens across all of it. Public works, same thing. Police, same thing. These are the issues that they're dealing with. So it's not like we're ignoring the problem. It's not like we don't want to do anything about it. It's not, it impacts the services that we can deliver to the citizens of this community outside of just addressing the homeless problem. So that's kind of where we're at on the operational side. And just take that example of the Nealon Park playground and apply that to pretty much anything you see. Roads, everything. So that's one of the things that we're working on there, trying to get that addressed. Now, what we're going to talk about next time is one of the factors that are unique to our community that maybe are a variable in addressing this problem. One of them is post office park, so we'll talk about that and its unique status in the community next time. But there are others as well. So think about what those might be and bring that as part of the discussion for the next meeting. July 26th at 9. We'll be right here in this room, similar setup, although I don't think we'll have a PowerPoint at that point. for that meeting. It'll just be a lot of discussion about that topic. Hopefully, we'll be able to identify some more of those things that are like post office park or that are unique about our community. And then lastly, I just want to point out a couple of things that we have done and a couple of things that are upcoming that address this particular issue. One of those is the camping in public, on public property. Kathleen went over that a little bit. We updated that last year. The next one is camping on private property, which is, we talked about a little bit earlier this year. Chief Beeson and I did with crime prevention through environmental design, those types of things. And there was a lot of furor over that because people thought we were going to require them to cut down the trees, which was never said. I don't know where it came from. Probably Facebook, yeah. So those are the types of things that we're working on. The private property camping, basically what it is asking property owners to take care of their own property, which is what you have to do, right?
Trying.
Yeah, trying. And we want to be able to help with that. But in order to do that, we have to identify that as a nuisance in our code, which is, there's a whole lot of things to go into it, which is why I'm happy I had Kathleen help me write it. She's the lawyer. She will keep the city out of liability, legal trouble. Those are the various things. And then long-term, looking at what it costs to build a shelter space. We had a community group that built a shelter in Lacey, I think. And we had a presentation in partnership with the Mason County Public Health, and I can't remember the name of that group, but their last estimate for a shelter was about $20 million. So that's what we're faced with. Any closing comments before we get out of here on time?
Can I, real quick, meeting time kind of sucks. That's exactly the time that we have our commission meetings.
Yeah.
And so if you could push it back, push it to 11 o'clock, that'd be sweet. If not, I mean, the county will have to miss the meetings on Tuesdays.
Okay.
I just wanted to be hopeful about tomorrow. I want to give us all homework to think about. There's a concept called Functional Zero that's working in Bakersfield. Houston, Texas has done a really good job with the homelessness problem. Also, Port Angeles and Clallam County has done a really good job, and they've embedded social workers with the police force. And it needs an integrated approach. We need everyone here at the table, and we need to talk about all the solutions and put them all out there and listen to each other. And thank you. And Dean, I want to apologize. And I want to say that I'm listening, and a lot of the solutions that have come up in the past are 19th century, 20th century solutions. Like, a lot of police people have been giving rides to folks to different areas, and we're shipping them around, and we're playing musical chairs with a lot of these homeless folks. And that's what's really going on. And everyone's passing the buck to someone else, and we're finally deciding we're going to do something right here, right now in Shelton, because we're downstream of everything. And there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go. This is the same thing that happened back in the 30s, and there were Okies from Oklahoma coming out, and keep moving, because we don't need you. And then there was a bonus army that, we actually cleared veterans who served in World War I were cleared out and stomped on by our own federal government because they're homeless. And I just want to let you guys know that we are all coming together right here, right now, and say this stops here, the buck stops here, and we're going to do something about it, and that we're trying to find solutions, and that we're listening to everyone in the room, and we hear the pain and suffering that you guys are going through. I'm also a citizen that lives here downtown, and I walk my dog every day and see what's going on. And there are more people that are unreported than are reported. And I see a lot of people sleeping in their cars, trying to work it out. And you know what? We have a lot of economic refugees right here and right now. And I'm just happy that we're all here together and we're sitting and talking, and that we're not going to continually fight each other, and that we're trying to find solutions. So thank you very much.
So right now, July 26th at 9 o'clock, if that changes, I'll let everybody know. We'll let everybody know if that changes. But make sure you update your own calendars for the next meeting, because different email, everything, it gets all screwed up. So but I will email everybody and let you know when the next meeting is. And I think that's it. I appreciate you all coming, and I appreciate you all listening, and we'll see you next time.